Hi, I'm Rebecca. I work in the Environment and Geography Department at the University of York. I'm a research fellow on the Fix Our Food programme funded by UKRI. The work for that is based in Yorkshire. It's about Yorkshire food systems. But previous to that, I did my PhD in East Africa. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today.
What work do you do?
So it's more the social sciences end of the scale of environmental science work. And it's lots of different things. So applying different methods to just understand people and their relationship with nature. And then I've used multiple different framings for that. So with the master's research, it was more about livelihoods and how livelihoods are affected by different types of factors: land use, land cover, climate change, and how that affects that dynamic between people and the environment. In terms of the PhD, the much more in-depth work was doing a lot of work, like workshops, trying to bring different people together with different experiences and different kind of needs from the environment together in a space, and managing a conversation and a dialogue sort of and deliberation between what are different people's wants and needs for the environment for the future and how can they manage it in order to meet those needs going forward. And that's kind of what I do now as well. So with the food systems work, it's very similar, bringing different people together, so people who are affected by different sort of challenges in the food system, people that want to advocate for change, and trying to bring people together and come up with like an effective type of dialogue that you can bring forward into future planning.
Why did you study at York?
When I applied for university, I applied for 5 different universities and 5 different courses. And I thought I'll just cast the net wide, see what comes back, and that'll tell me something a bit about what I should do. And at York, I didn't get into biology because I didn't have a chemistry A level. And then I got a handwritten letter from Malcolm Cresser, who was head of department at the time, saying, "We'd like you to consider environmental sciences. We think you'd be a good fit." And that felt like a nice personal touch. And then so I came for the open day. And it was a small department at the time. It still is relatively small. And it was just very, very welcoming. So at the open day, they had lots of the different kind of academic researchers there to talk to about the work that they do, the different kinds of like trajectories you could have, like through going through environmental sciences. And my dad came with me to all of the open days, and he was very impressed with the sandwich selection. So he was pro-York. It's closest to my family as well. So it just felt right from that perspective.
Why did you want to work in Africa?
I can start with the interest in the environment to start off with, because that started really, really young. And I was actually started off really interested in animals and biodiversity. And I was really interested in orangutans, and I sponsored an orangutan with my pocket money. So then I was really interested in rainforests, actually. And that was my thing that when I started the degree in environmental sciences, I came in really interested in rainforests. And I think it was just that initial project, that undergraduate project that took me to East Africa, that then took me down that track. And I think it was that project, even though the project was very ecologically based, the first one, what I was interested in was people's relationship with nature. And I think that's what I learned on that project, because we worked with a lot of local research assistants that just navigated the environment in a completely different way to how we knew how to, and that interested me.
What was the problem that your PhD was trying to address?
In Zanzibar, it's a really, really interesting place because there's 2 kind of main islands, Pemba and Unguja, that have really different socio-economic trajectories, but they both kind of face this rapid land cover change, which affects sort of the underpinning environments that people rely on quite directly to meet their basic needs. So Pemba is much more agriculturally based. So they have a trade in clove, which is their kind of major export. And then Unguja Island is much more focused on tourism. So it was a really interesting case study to look at how these challenges play out in different contexts for a small island. So the challenge is that there's just growing and emerging issues around water security, food security, and sort of energy needs and how people manage those as well. The environments that people depend on for those 3 things are often similar and overlapping, or have trade-offs and synergies. So I wanted to look at those 3 issues together.
What approach did you use to investigate this?
I wanted to do a lot of in-depth work to really understand the context. So I spent like 6 months in Zanzibar initially doing more ethnographic work, just travelling to different places, having conversations with sort of people of all different kinds of livelihoods to just understand what's life like, how do they manage their basic needs, what do they draw upon for that, what things are getting better for them, what things are getting more challenging for them. That helped me come up with a research framing. And then I did focus groups following on from that. So I collaborated with the forest department there, and together with them sort of selected sort of 10 sites that are much more understudied than other places in Zanzibar. And then we went on to do workshops with those communities. And that was about trying to understand how land use and land cover has changed over the last 20 years already. And what have those changes meant for how people have accessed water, energy and food. So we looked at kind of like the security from different dimensions, like the quality, the availability and the access. So we took all of that information and we used that as like the research framing for the Kesho scenario workshops. So that kind of like tried to strengthen the community voice basically in these multi-stakeholder workshops. So in the multi-stakeholder workshops we had representatives from different sectors that became important as a result of the findings from the first stages of the research. So we had like from the forestry sector, energy, water, we had livelihoods NGOs, and then we also had sort of representatives from each of those community workshops coming to those multi-stakeholder workshops as well. And in those they planned out sort of 3 different future alternatives of where they might try to plan their land use in the future. So one was around sort of putting sustainability at the centre of settlement planning. Another one was around sort of enhancing and protecting ecosystem services. And then the other one was about adaptive capacity. So we split the groups into sort of 3 groups and they worked up these sort of narratives of what that would look like. And then they considered all of the different land cover types within those scenarios and how would they change if we followed that scenario, and that was the basis for the modelling. So then I went down this big modelling route which took me about a year to get to understand the software and translate all of that data into these maps at the end that kind of show people's visions for the future.
What was the software you used?
I used TerSet. So the first thing that I did was this like projection of business as usual future map to use as like a baseline for the other maps. So that was putting in data around like the variables that people had spoken about. So trying to pull on existing data sets that would show that, you know, like population change and climate change, which is actually really hard at those kind of scales. Then the modelling for the scenarios, you can put in all of the different variables that people have mentioned that would be influenced. You can specify sort of the percentage of land cover change. You can put in likelihood indicators. You can kind of rank the changes as well. So it just allows you to put a lot of detail into the modelling process.
What did you find?
What was really interesting, like the time of doing it, because it cut across like the COVID pandemic. So all of my field work was before COVID, and then my data analysis and everything was happening during COVID. And just it was interesting just how much more rapid the land cover change was as a result of like a big perturbation like that. So it did make it seem like those scenarios, they need to incorporate that as well of like unforeseen circumstances of like things can happen faster or slower if something happens like a big perturbation that you were not expecting. But I think some of the bigger things that came out of it were less to do with the specific scenarios and following a certain scenario route and more looking at how people organise for trying to stimulate change and the governance aspects of it. So that was the big thing that came out of the workshops, is that people recognised just how siloed the decision making had been around land use and land cover, and that decisions from one department can affect the outcomes of another department and they don't necessarily have those conversations. So that was the thing that people found most useful, was recognising the interconnections between their work. And then there was a lot of recommendations around more equipping people with skills and understanding to help navigate challenges going forwards. So the building adaptive capacity aspect was key to that. I think that kind of making sure people have the skills to be able to harness different types of jobs, for instance, and just making sure people have access to the right services. So there's a lot in terms of what you could put into policy recommendation or like strategic planning, even from an NGO point of view. And it didn't seem like there's like one scenario that's like the one to go for. It's probably more like a cross section of sort of activities across those scenarios.
Where can people access your work?
So my work was split into sort of 4 main chapters, and they're all published. And the PhD will be on a repository, I think White Rose Depository at York, but it's not on there yet because I'm still making my minor amendments. Yeah.
If you had to do it all over again, what advice would you give yourself?
I think when I did my first, like the undergraduate degree and the first masters, I think I didn't have as much confidence in myself in terms of going down the academic route, when actually I probably was equipped with like the skills and experience and knowledge to do that. So I spent a lot of time in between not pursuing research. So I'd probably, if I was to go back, I would try to just have a little bit more confidence in myself to go on to something into research straight from the first masters, but I enjoyed the convoluted route anyway. I think the biggest lessons that I learned through the PhD process of working in an East African context is that relationship building was really, really important. Understanding the context was really important, and making space and time for that in the PhD process helped me come up with a more robust research framing that was really relevant to the context and the needs of what people want from research, and also set up a methodology that was appropriate, sort of socially appropriate, culturally appropriate, and would come out with outputs that were really useful for future planning. So that was the main things that I came out with. And yeah.